You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds, the owner of Summer Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal, and your host of this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Today we are talking about Tacoma, the aroma of Tacoma, which isn't quite as bad as it used to be anymore. It used to smell really bad. It used to smell like a mill town, because that's kind of what it was for a lot of years. It was a port town and had a lot of lumber come through, and it kind of smelled bad because when you make lumber, it smells bad. So what we're focusing on today is a new story from King 5, and it basically highlights a study done by WalletHub.com. And the story is, report ranks Tacoma as one of the worst cities to rent in the U.S. Now, when you see these headlines, you got to realize it's typically for just a couple of statistics, and those statistics might be super specific, like skewed for Tacoma. In this case, I don't think it really was. I think it's just Tacoma is, because of its the cost of its rental housing and how much traffic there is and livability in general, it's a desirable place to live, but it's also really expensive relative to a lot of other cities. And so it kind of fell in those magic lines of, oh my gosh, Tacoma's horrible. So that's what this article is kind of saying. Tacoma is not horrible. It's not a terrible place to live. It's not a terrible place to rent, but it does have some factors that are kind of worth looking at. So let's jump in and take a look and see what it is. So WalletHub.com put Tacoma at 173rd out of 183 cities in the United States for renters to live in. 173 out of 183. I want to look at that list and see what the other 10 were. Probably cities you've never heard of, because that's kind of how this stuff always goes, right? All right. This year, Tacoma was named as one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. However, one report says it's not a favorable environment for renters. Not good for renters. In a recent WalletHub report, Tacoma was ranked 173rd out of 183rd cities when it comes to best place for renters. That puts Tacoma in the bottom 10. Seattle also wasn't highly ranked, coming in at 142nd. Now, I know when you hear people say the Seattle-Tacoma market, they kind of throw it all in there accordingly. The actual city confines of Seattle encompasses about 744,000 people. That's the population of Seattle proper. And Tacoma proper is about 216,000 people. So you've got, call it shy of 250,000 in Tacoma. You've got 750,000 in Seattle. But then when you make up the greater areas, all the suburban markets, go up to Everett. So you include kind of from Everett, which is to the north of Seattle by, I think, about 30 miles. It could be an hour and a half drive in traffic. You go from Everett down to Seattle, down to Tacoma, and then you kind of expand east, because to the west we have Puget Sound. Can't go there, can't sink, can't unless you float. So you go east, and then you hit the Cascade Mountains. So we are basically landlocked. The greater Seattle-Tacoma area is landlocked by the ocean to the west, Puget Sound, and the mountains, Cascade Mountains, to the east. So we've got this area that is, I think it is 3.44 million total of big metropolitan area, but the actual confines of Seattle and Tacoma are much, much smaller. So the statistics for Tacoma, when you read these reports, understand that they are always super specific. And it's like, Tacoma got shanked in that report, or Seattle got shanked in that one, or Bellevue has done really well in this study. It's because it's got a couple of factors that those cities either do well or do terrible in. So let's take a look here. So the report focused on two main factors: the city's rental market and quality of life. According to WalletHub, Tacoma came in at 118th in quality of life rankings. That includes factors like safety and driver friendliness. So you've got, driver friendliness, how do you measure that? You take a survey and people aren't happy with other drivers in Tacoma, therefore it gets a bad rating. That's kind of how that goes. For the rental market ranking, which includes factors like vacancy and affordability, Tacoma came in at 165th out of 183, I think it was. So, okay, vacancy and affordability I can understand that because you know what the average rent is, right? I mean, there's tons of different ways you can measure that. Vacancy is, how many of these places are vacant? You can figure that out. Vacancy in Tacoma is very minimal. So you've got this issue of affordability, and then you throw in safety, so higher crime levels. And then you've also got driver friendliness, stuff like that, where it's just the overall, people are happy to live there. People are not necessarily happy to live in Tacoma per these criteria. That's what's going on. According to Rent Cafe, the average rent in Tacoma is $1,362 for the average apartment size of 834 square feet. So that would be a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, maybe a 2-bedroom, 2 bath, and you're spending, call it on your way to $1,400. That sounds about right. I know that same apartment in Seattle would be a couple grand, $2,200. Nikki, what do you think? Apartment in Seattle, 834 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. What would that be in an average project?
I have no idea. A lot.
Couple of grand?
Yes, at least.
At least a couple of grand. Maybe $2,200 depending on the location, how far away you are from CHOP. Who knows? It's unknown. All right. But Amy Lowry is a real estate agent with Windermere Properties. She also owns rental properties herself. She says finding a place in Tacoma is a big challenge for renters. It's a very strong market. If you own a rental property, and I get a lot of calls from people that are looking for a place to rent, and they just can't seem to find anything. So we constantly talk about low supply in the greater Seattle market. Well, Tacoma's got it too. In a lot of areas, there's no inventory. There's no supply. According to Lowry, it's not only people who work in Seattle and are looking to move to Tacoma, but rental properties are hard to come by because there's a lot of local industries where workers don't necessarily know if they want to stay for a while, such as healthcare and the military. So it's more of a temporary market. And you've got BLM, McCord. What's the Air Force base down in Tacoma? Anybody? McCord. Joint Base McCord, JBLM. Whatever that is. We've got Air Force and I think Army down south in Tacoma. So that's a couple of bases down there. And so you've got a lot of rental housing as a result. People want to rent because they're not going to buy because they're not going to be there forever. So rentals are at a premium down in those areas of Pierce County, particularly in Tacoma. All right. So we have people that transition in and out. Oftentimes they come and they don't know how long they're going to be here. So they'll choose to rent versus buy. So you've got a lot of pressure on rental housing. But the safety factors are you've got some crime in Tacoma. That's just kind of the way it goes. And then you've got some factors that make people kind of unhappy to live there. And so it doesn't rank well in this study. We reached out to this article goes on saying, we reached out to the Tacoma mayor's office to see what the city thinks of this ranking. Let's try and get a reaction from the mayor because he doesn't have enough going on. Spokesperson Maria Lee from the mayor's office says that the city recognizes the scale of the crisis that is the lack of housing, especially affordable housing. Lee says that the city has developed an affordable housing action strategy to help address the problem. The city also has put in place different programs to help landlords and renters during the COVID-19 pandemic. Lee says Tacoma used $1.2 million from the Housing Trust Fund to start a rental assistance program for people affected by COVID-19. The city also gives landlords a one-time payment of up to $1,000. So we're kind of focusing on things that the city of Tacoma is doing from the COVID-19 standpoint, but the overall issue there is lack of affordability. Let's just be honest, that's what it is. And when you get into a landlocked type market like Seattle or Tacoma, Puget Sound to the west, Cascade Mountains to the east, you can't go very far south, you can't go very far north because you run into other developed areas. So there's nowhere to really go to develop a whole bunch of housing to give you that supply that you desperately need. So guess what? Prices just go up. Prices on housing are skyrocketing right now in Seattle and Tacoma. Tacoma especially, call it the last 4 years, has become a really legit rental market. Like people are buying fourplexes, people are buying rental homes left and right because the rents have risen to the point where you can purchase a property, put a decent down payment, and you might actually get that bad boy to cash flow. And that is something you cannot do in most of King County, here in Seattle, here in Bellevue, where our offices are. Unless you put a 50% down payment, you're not going to get a property to cash flow. And if you're putting 50% down payment, you're getting a minimal cash flow, and your cash on cash return is probably better off somewhere elsewhere. But you do have that appreciation. So people love their appreciation in real estate, but it's not something you can live on over time like you can dividends from a stock, like you can rental income from a property that you've paid off. So a lot of people are going to an area like Tacoma that's outside of the major metropolitan area of Seattle, and they're buying there because they've got good cash flow. And that's what's making it difficult for renters, because all of a sudden that puts pressure, upward pressure is being put on that market, and it's just becoming more and more expensive to rent in. So that's what you've got going on. You've got pressures on a city that were already existing, and then you've got affordability issues, and then you've got kind of more some temporary, is what we're saying. Tacoma with the military base housing, that's a rental issue. And then some of the other industries that Tacoma is well known for, they aren't necessarily the industries that are paying top dollar, that those employees are going to be able to buy a house. They're more like the healthcare industry. That's a pretty temporary industry for a lot of people to get a job for a couple of years. You don't necessarily know if you're going to put your roots down, if you're going to stay there for a while, but you might jumpstart your career by taking a job at one of those places and kind of get going. That is a lot of what is happening right now. And so I see a lot of appreciation in the future of Tacoma. And guess what? You're just going to have issues like getting on these studies, and there's going to be reports out where like, oh, Tacoma, horrible. But it's a very pretty city. We were down there, I think, at the beginning of last year. We were doing a video on what you got at different price points in Tacoma, and you get a lot more bang for your buck in Tacoma. But also, in order to commute back up to, say, Microsoft in Redmond or downtown Bellevue, you've got to be driving at the right times of the day. Otherwise, you are just going to be hosed. It's going to take forever. You've only got two major roadways, well, kind of three. But you've got I-5, which is a big interstate that goes from Tacoma up to Seattle and goes all the way up to Bellingham. And then a little bit further over from east of downtown Seattle, you've got 405, which takes you down to I-5 that takes you down to Tacoma. So really only I-5 through most of Tacoma, and you got a couple other small freeways, but it's not an area that is easy to get around. So drivers being happy, not necessarily something you're going to find with people who have to commute to or from Tacoma. Now, one of the major reasons I go to Tacoma a lot is because our major event center here in Seattle, the Key Arena, where the Sonics used to play, that's the old Seattle Coliseum that was done for the World's Fair in 1962 when the Space Needle got put up. There's some rambling history lessons, right? Sound like grandma who just babbles about history. Can't remember her own middle name or her daughter's name, but she'll remember the World's Fair from 1962. So the Key Arena, or Seattle Center Arena, where I went to a lot of concerts back when I was a kid, that's been renovated, being undergoing major renovation for, I think, a couple of years now. And so a lot of major concerts have gone down to Tacoma. So we've kind of got our routine down for Tacoma. You've got places you can park that are easy to get around. You've got certain dive bars you go to and get a meal. But I am looking forward to doing that. Don't know when I'll go to the next concert in Tacoma. From what I can figure out, June of 2021 is when most major insurance companies they are underwriting the insurance for concerts. Because let's be honest, if you don't have insurance for a concert, that's a no-go. And what underwriter wants to go, yeah, let's underwrite this concert. We're in the middle of a pandemic and cases are going up, but I think it's a pretty good idea to underwrite this policy. Let's just move forward with it. And right now you can't have concerts in phase 2 or phase 1.75 here in King County. Concerts are a no-go. Gatherings over, I don't know, what is it? A handful of people are illegal. So I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to go to a concert in Tacoma. But the Tacoma Dome is a pretty good venue, and I enjoy going there. It's just, this article is saying for renters, even though you've got that proximity to the Tacoma Dome, maybe living down there is a little bit trickier than a lot of other cities, and their rent is much higher, and it's big city problems, just like Seattle. All right, so that's it for me. Again, I'm Sean Reynolds from Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal, your host of this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Love to have you subscribe. Hit the like for this video if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't already, please do so on our podcast platforms. And hit the notification bell and share this content with your friends and or family if you find it helpful to your career or to your life or just in general. So that's it for me. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for listening. I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.